There is a substance that contains 5 times more nitrogen than the richest topsoil, 7 times more phosphorus, 10 times more potassium. It holds plant growth hormones that trigger root development on contact. It suppresses fungal disease without chemicals. It retains moisture in drought. It is not manufactured in a factory. It is manufactured inside the body of a twinchworm. The global fertilizer industry generates $207 billion a year, selling you a synthetic version of what an insect builds for free in a shoebox under your kitchen sink. They buried this, not because it failed, because it cannot be patented. 50 years before the birth of Christ, Cleopatra VII rules the Nile Valley. She commands fleets. She negotiates with Caesar. She builds temples that will stand 2,000 years, and she issues a decree that most histories skip entirely. The earthworm is declared sacred. Removing a single worm from Egyptian soil is punishable by death. Not exile, not fine, not imprisonment. Death for taking a worm from the ground. Cleopatra understood what the Nile floods left behind every spring. Rich, dark, mineral-dense silt deposited across the valley floor. But silt alone does not grow wheat. Something had to transform that raw sediment into living soil capable of feeding an empire. That something was the worm. Millions of them working beneath the surface, consuming dead organic matter, excreting a substance so biologically complete that the entire Egyptian agricultural system depended on its continuous production. Egypt did not run on gold. Egypt did not run on conquest. Egypt ran on what came out of a worm's body, deposited silently beneath the surface of every cultivated field along the Nile. Cleopatra was not protecting an animal. She was protecting the machine that fed her empire. Aristotle called them the intestines of the earth. He observed in the 4th century before Christ that worms consumed soil and organic matter and produced something fundamentally different from what they ate. Something darker in color, something richer in texture, something that made plants grow vigorously where nothing grew before. He did not have a microscope. He did not have a laboratory. He had eyes. And what he saw was transformation on a scale that no other creature replicated. Dead leaves entered one end of the worm. Life exited the other. For 2,000 years after Cleopatra's decree, every civilization that sustained itself through agriculture understood this relationship. Roman farmers collected worm-rich soil from beneath manure piles and spread it deliberately across their fields. Pliny, the Elder, documented the practice in the 1st century. Medieval European farmers measured the health of their land by the number of worm casts visible on the soil surface after a spring rain. Chinese agricultural texts from the Han Dynasty referenced earthworm activity as a primary marker of productive soil. Japanese rice paddies were managed to encourage worm populations in the surrounding berms. No one called what the worm produced fertilizer. They did not have that word. They called it the earth working, the soil making itself. The worm was not an additive you purchased. The worm was the system. The worm was the factory. And its product was the foundation of every harvest for 40 centuries of continuous agriculture across 3 continents. Then, in 1881, Charles Robert Darwin published his final scientific work, not on the origin of species, not the descent of man, not the expression of the emotions. His last book, the one he considered the most important contribution of his career, was titled The Formation of Vegetable Mold Through the Action of Worms, with Observations on Their Habits. He had spent 39 years writing it, longer than any other project in his life, longer than evolution took him to publish, longer than natural selection took to defend. His conclusion, after nearly 4 decades of meticulous observation and measurement, was contained in one sentence: that the chemical fertilizer industry has spent 140 years trying to make you forget. He wrote that it may be doubted whether there are many other animals which have played so important a part in the history of the world as these lowly organized creatures. Darwin calculated that earthworms in English pastures moved 18 tons of soil per acre per year through their digestive systems. Every productive inch of topsoil across the British Isles had passed through the gut of a worm. The fields were not made of ground rock. They were made of worm excrement, layers of it, centuries of it. The soil itself was not geology, it was biology. It was the accumulated output of billions of organisms quietly eating and excreting in darkness for millennia. And that output was alive in ways no mineral deposit could ever be. Now here is what modern science eventually confirmed when researchers finally stopped ignoring Darwin and measured exactly what comes out of the other end of a worm. Earthworm castings, the material excreted after organic matter passes completely through the worm's digestive tract, contain 5 times more plant-available nitrogen than surrounding topsoil, 7 times more phosphorus, 10 times more potassium, 3 times more exchangeable magnesium, 1.5 times more calcium. These are not estimates. These are not approximations. These are direct laboratory measurements published in peer-reviewed journals and replicated across institutions on 4 continents over 3 decades of research. But the mineral content is not even the important part. Any chemical factory can concentrate nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium into a bag. What no factory has ever replicated, what no chemical process has ever produced, what no industrial system has ever come close to matching is what else the castings contain: humic acids, complex organic molecules that bond directly to the charged surfaces of root cell membranes and physically accelerate the rate at which nutrients pass into the plant. Studies published in the journal Plant and Soil confirmed that humic acids isolated from earthworm castings increased lateral root emergence by 300% compared to untreated controls. Cytokinins and auxins, plant growth hormones, the exact same molecular compounds that pharmaceutical and agricultural laboratories synthesize for thousands of dollars per gram. The worm produces them as a metabolic byproduct of digestion. They exit in every casting. They trigger cell division in root tips. They stimulate shoot elongation. They accelerate flowering. They are free, living microbial communities exceeding 10,000 species of beneficial bacteria, fungi, and protozoa per single gram of castings. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria that pull nitrogen from atmosphere and deliver it to roots. Mycorrhizal fungi that extend the effective root zone of every plant they contact by 300 to 700%. Protozoa that consume bacteria and release plant-available nitrogen in precise concentrations at the exact location where roots can absorb it. A living, self-regulating nutrient delivery network that no synthetic product has ever contained, because synthetic products are sterile. They are dead. They contain salts dissolved in granules, nothing more. No synthetic fertilizer contains a single living organism. No bag on any shelf in any garden center in America contains plant growth hormones. No product manufactured anywhere on Earth replicates what happens inside the digestive tract of a 2-inch red wiggler worm eating a banana peel under your kitchen sink. In 2011, researchers at Cornell University published a finding that should have collapsed the garden chemical industry overnight. Vermicompost, the formal scientific name for worm castings produced at scale, suppressed Pythium, Rhizoctonia, and Verticillium, 3 of the most economically devastating soil-borne pathogens in commercial agriculture. The suppression was not marginal. It was comparable to commercial fungicides. Directly comparable, the same study demonstrated that plants grown in vermicompost-amended soil showed growth increases of 40 to 60% over unfertilized controls. A substance produced by worms, eating kitchen garbage and cardboard, matched the disease suppression performance of products costing hundreds of dollars per acre, while simultaneously outperforming synthetic fertilizers in growth promotion. Published by Cornell, peer-reviewed, freely available, and never once mentioned on any product label, any store display, or any lawn care advertisement in the 15 years since its publication. The mechanism behind the disease suppression is an enzyme called chitinase. Earthworm castings contain chitinase in concentrations unmatched by any other organic amendment. Chitinase dissolves chitin. Chitin is the primary structural compound in fungal cell walls and in the exoskeletons of insects. When worm castings are present in soil, pathogenic fungi like Pythium and Rhizoctonia cannot establish colonies because their cell walls are degraded enzymatically before they can penetrate root tissue. Soft-bodied pest insects, aphids, whiteflies, fungus, gnats cannot thrive because their exoskeletons are weakened on contact with the enzyme. One substance, produced by a worm, that fertilizes, suppresses disease, repels pests, builds soil structure, retains water, delivers growth hormones, and costs nothing after the initial $25 investment in a pound of worms that reproduce themselves indefinitely. A study published in Frontiers in Plant Science in 2017 tested vermicompost head-to-head against synthetic fertilizer on tomato cultivation. The vermicompost plots produced yields equivalent to or exceeding the synthetic plots. But the fruit from vermicompost soil had measurably higher sugar content, superior nutritional density, better flavor profiles in blind taste tests. And the soil beneath those plants told an even more dramatic story. Improved water holding capacity, improved aeration, microbial populations thousands of times denser than the synthetic treated soil. Earthworm activity in the vermicompost plots was vigorous. In the synthetic plots, earthworm populations had declined. The chemical killed the organism that produced the superior product. That is not coincidence. That is the business model made visible in a single study. Then came the machine that buried all of it. In 1909, a German chemist named Fritz Haber stood in a laboratory in Karlsruhe and demonstrated that nitrogen could be pulled from the atmosphere and fixed into ammonia using extreme pressure and an iron catalyst. Karl Bosch, an industrial engineer at BASF, scaled the process into factory production by 1913. Both men received Nobel Prizes. The Haber-Bosch process is credited with enabling the feeding of billions. That is the version they teach in schools. Here is the version they do not. The same ammonia that feeds a wheat plant also detonates when oxidized into ammonium nitrate. Germany used the Haber-Bosch process to manufacture explosives throughout World War I, after the British naval blockades severed their access to Chilean saltpeter. It armed the Western Front. It filled artillery shells. It killed millions. The process manufactured munitions for the Second World War as well. When the bomb stopped falling in 1945, the factories did not close. They had infrastructure, they had trained workers, they had chemical inventory, they had shareholders expecting returns, they needed civilian customers. American lawns became those customers. American farms became those customers. Synthetic nitrogen hit the consumer market in the late 1940s. Scotts launched its first seasonal lawn care program. The message was simple. Grass needs nitrogen. This bag has nitrogen. Buy it 4 times a year. The same compound that detonated in shells was repackaged in cheerful green bags with pictures of lush lawns and stacked on pallets in every hardware store from Maine to California. Within a single decade, the entire American relationship with soil was rewritten. Soil stopped being a living system. It became a container, an inert medium into which you poured chemicals and from which you extracted production. The worms became invisible. The fungi became irrelevant. The bacteria became unnamed. The 4-billion-year biological system that built every inch of productive earth on this planet was dismissed as old-fashioned. The bag was modern. The bag was scientific. The bag was progress. The consequences arrived in stages. Synthetic nitrogen fertilizer is a salt, ammonium sulfate, ammonium nitrate, urea, salts. They dissolve in water instantly. They deliver nitrogen to the plant blade fast. The grass greens in days. The crop grows in weeks, but the salt kills the biology beneath. It alters soil pH. It collapses fungal networks. It decimates bacterial populations. It drives earthworms from treated soil. Studies published in peer-reviewed literature confirm that earthworm populations in chemically managed agricultural land decline by 33 to 41% compared to organic or untreated systems. The living network that produced free nitrogen, free phosphorus, free potassium, free growth hormones, and free disease suppression dies, and the soil becomes dependent on the next bag, the next application, the next purchase. That is not a flaw in the product. That is the product functioning exactly as the business model requires. Dead soil buys fertilizer forever. Living soil buys nothing. Today, the global fertilizer industry is worth $207 billion. Scotts Miracle-Gro alone reported $3.4 billion in revenue in fiscal 2025. The company sells for seasonal application programs per year at $12 to $15 per bag to tens of millions of American households, $60 per year per lawn, multiplied across 50 million properties. $3 billion annually in consumer lawn fertilizer alone. Built on soil that has been chemically trained to die without the next dose. Built on organisms that have been systematically killed by the product they are told they need. Built on a dependency cycle as deliberate and as profitable as any addiction ever engineered. Meanwhile, the runoff from those $207 billion of synthetic nitrogen flows downhill into streams, rivers, estuaries, and oceans. Over 400 dead zones have been documented in coastal waters worldwide. Areas where nitrogen-fueled algal blooms consume all available oxygen and suffocate every living creature in the water column. The Gulf of Mexico dead zone exceeded 8,000 square miles in 2024. The Baltic Sea is hypoxic across vast stretches of its floor. The Chesapeake Bay, the coast of China, the coast of India, all fed by the same nitrogen that was designed for bombs, repackaged for lawns, and poured into living systems until those systems stopped living. The worm never caused a dead zone. The worm never killed a microbe. The worm never poisoned a river. The worm built the system that the fertilizer destroyed. Here is what you can do today, for less than the cost of a single bag of Scott's Turf Builder. Buy any plastic storage bin, 10 to 15 gallons, opaque sides. Drill 20 small holes in the lid for ventilation and 6 in the bottom for drainage. Set it on a tray to catch moisture. Cost $8 to $12 at any store. Shred newspaper or corrugated cardboard into 1-inch strips. Fill the bin 3/4 full. Spray with water until the bedding feels like a wrung-out sponge. Damp throughout but not dripping when squeezed. This is the habitat. Order 1 pound of red wiggler worms. Eisenia, not the earthworms from your garden. Not night crawlers, red wigglers specifically. They are surface-dwelling composters evolved to process organic matter in shallow, confined environments. They thrive in bins. They cost $20 to $30 from any online supplier. This is your last purchase. The worms replace themselves indefinitely. Place the worms on the surface of the damp bedding. Leave the lid off under a light for 15 minutes. They will burrow to escape the light. Wait 24 hours for them to settle. Then begin feeding. Bury kitchen scraps beneath the bedding, fruit peels, banana skins, apple cores, vegetable trimmings, coffee grounds, crushed eggshells, stale bread, leftover rice. No meat, no dairy, no cooking oil, no citrus in large quantities. 1 to 2 cups of scraps every 3 to 4 days. The worms eat their own body weight in organic matter every single day. 1 pound of worms processes a ½ pound of food waste per day. 3.5 pounds per week. Over 180 pounds of kitchen waste per year diverted from landfill and converted into the most potent plant food on Earth. Red wigglers reproduce aggressively under favorable conditions. Each mature worm produces 2 to 3 cocoons per week. Each cocoon contains 4 to 6 embryos. Those embryos hatch in 40 to 60 days and reach sexual maturity in 60 to 90 days. Your initial 1 pound population doubles within 3 months. Within 6 months, it doubles again. Within a year, a single bin produces more castings than most households can use. You will give worms away to neighbors. You will start a second bin. The system scales itself without additional cost. Harvest the finished castings by pushing all completed material to one side of the bin and adding fresh, damp bedding and food scraps to the empty side. Within 2 weeks, the worms migrate entirely toward the fresh food. Scoop the abandoned side, pure castings, no worms to sort. Apply 1 inch of castings to the surface of any garden bed. Mix a generous handful into the soil of any potted plant or container. Brew a liquid extract by steeping 1 cup of castings in 1 gallon of dechlorinated water for 24 hours. Stirring occasionally, then strain and spray directly on plant foliage. The humic acids and living microorganisms colonize leaf surfaces and suppress foliar disease on contact. Use weekly during growing season. No measuring devices needed. No chemical mixing, no pH calibration, no protective gloves, no warning labels, no keep away from children text, no environmental hazard, no runoff risk, no dead zones downstream. A $40 total investment, a bin and a bag of worms, replacing a $300 per year chemical fertilizer, fungicide, and soil amendment habit forever, while simultaneously eliminating 180 pounds of kitchen waste from your garbage each year. While building soil instead of destroying it. While growing food that is nutritionally superior to anything produced with synthetic inputs. While supporting earthworm populations instead of killing them, the fertilizer industry does not want you to own a worm bin. Scott's Miracle-Gro does not sell them. Home Depot does not display them. Lowe's does not stock them beside the fertilizer wall. True Green does not mention them in any service package. No television commercial, no magazine advertisement, no social media promotion. No door-to-door sales representative will ever tell you that a plastic box of worms eating banana peels under your kitchen sink produces a substance that outperforms every single product on their shelves. $207 billion per year depends on that silence continuing. $3.4 billion in Scott's revenue depends on you Never learning that the worm already solved the problem, they charge you $60 per year to pretend to address. The entire model, the bags, the schedules, the seasonal programs, the dependency, the dead soil, the dead zones, depends on one thing: you not owning a $12 bin and a $25 pound of worms. Cleopatra made it punishable by death to remove a worm from her soil 3,000 years ago. She understood that the worm was the economy. Darwin spent 39 years proving that the worm built every inch of productive topsoil on the planet. Cornell proved in 2011 that castings suppress the 3 deadliest plant diseases without chemicals. Frontiers in Plant Science proved in 2017 that castings grow better food than synthetic fertilizer. The nutrients are measured. The hormones are documented. The enzymes are confirmed. The evidence is peer-reviewed, published, and freely available to anyone who searches for it, and systematically excluded from every product label, every garden center display, every lawn care service pitch, and every school curriculum in America for 80 consecutive years. The worm does not need a Nobel Prize. It does not need a patent. It does not need a war to end so its factories can find civilian customers. It eats your waste. It builds your soil. It feeds your plants. It suppresses your disease. It repels your pests. It costs you nothing after the day you bring it home. It reproduces without asking permission. It works in silence beneath your sink while the industry spends $207 billion a year praying you never open the lid and look inside. The worms are still here. They have always been here. They were here before the first factory was built, and they will be here after the last one rusts shut. They are waiting for a banana peel, a strip of cardboard, and a human being who finally understands what Cleopatra, Aristotle, and Darwin already knew: the soil does not need a bag, it needs a worm. If this vault opens something for you, subscribe and hit the bell. Every like and every share preserves what they tried to erase. The next vault opens soon.